Welcome back to Let's Talk Race and Modern. I'm your host, Harrison Paul, and happy Independence Day to all my Nigerian brothers and sisters. I used to try to be quite, quirky or, sarcastic, and I would say, happy false Independence Day. And especially when I came to my, consciousness, that was my first thing that I would always just do, just this frustration and anger about this false sense of independence that Africa supposedly has. And I realized by doing that, I would be, undermining the great work black men and women have done in the past to get us to where we are. And as the older I get in this fight, the older I get in this journey, I understand that it is stages, right? And the concept that we were going to come out on day one actually is probably a very immature concept. Should have known, though. My mother put that in her book, but I never truly understood it till now. This book has been out. You guys can go and get it. It's a colonized mindset to total emancipation. Thank you, Mrs. G. My mother wrote it, and she kind of wrote it as a young woman who straddled on either side of colonization and independence, right? So she was in Rhodesia, and she then, seen Zimbabwe become Zimbabwe. And what she realized as she grew up is that it was going to take time for things to actually register in the mind. A lot of things became a part of who we were under that captivity. A lot of things became, culture, really. Colonization, a colonized mind became a part of African culture in many ways. And yes, she's talking about Zimbabwe in this. I do want you Nigerians to really contextualize this and just see it as a universal African story in that respect. And today I'm just going to talk to you guys about going easy on Africa. I really just want to ask Nigerians to take it easy on Africa. I understand that there is this frustration with Africa, this frustration with what we've gone through, and frustration in the state of what we are in. And there seems to be this loathing of self that came, that I don't want you to be naive as to where that came from. That loathing of self comes from the abuse that we suffered. Some would say it's a long time ago. Some would say it's no, honestly. If there was a spirit of self-blame, if there was a spirit of beating yourself down, if there was a spirit of oppression that lived upon you, what made you think that when you came out of that, you were now going to instill in your children a different mentality other than that? Some may come in the comment section, I'm Nigerian, I don't, I'm big, I'm strong, I'm this. That's what Africans always feel that this is about. Oh, no, never. I'm not speaking about your weakness. It's not about you even as an individual. It's about a macro scale. You're taking a minor, oh, no, me. No, honestly. One of the patterns that I've noticed about Africans, and I want to say Nigerians, because I'm going to talk about Nigerians particularly today, is this mouth that beats ourselves down. Oh, poor leadership, poor this, poor that, poor this. And because we've been so engrossed with how much we hate ourselves or our capacity and how much leaders are terrible and all this kind of stuff, it was the perfect camouflage for the actual reality of the fact that independence was not a real independence in the first place. It was a perfect space for us to camouflage the false independence and flag independence that we were handed by the British. We can talk about Shell, BP, oil, everything that we own, everything that is really worth something and high value in Africa is not yet owned by Nigeria. So you're sitting here and saying to yourself, oh, listen, mismanagement. What do you manage? This is the truth about African independence. What do you manage? And the truth is, it's a question of what comes first, the chicken or the egg. It's because Africans speak this way about themselves, because Africans got in the habit of speaking a way about themselves, the way I hear the tone of how Nigerians can speak about Nigerians, the imperialist is able to hide behind that. But the true question is, like I said, the chicken or the egg. Is it the only reason you would even find yourself making such a far-fetched and false, I want to say, resolution or diagnosis of Nigeria's problem, is because you have such a level of low self-belief? Let me talk to you for a second. What makes you feel and believe about yourself? Listen, mismanagement is one thing. The state of Africa is long past mismanagement, brothers and sisters. Anybody who's in the UK right now or in the Ireland right now, that's what you call mismanagement. Housing shortage. Such and such shortage. People are not in a terrible state, but this is what you call mismanagement. This is what you call corruption. This is what you call greed. But the level to which this greed has gotten to, I don't even believe an African leader is capable of eating that much money by himself. Or whatever group or gang of people, whatever you call it, it's not even possible in a lifetime. I believe even if an African wanted to eat the money, there would still be more than what we're seeing left over. There would still be more than what we're seeing left over. So when you're standing here and saying it's a mismanagement of money, the only reason you're able to actually diagnose, it's like coming into a house today. I come into a house, my house maybe. I went out for the day. I come back. I'm wondering where everything's gone. I say to my lady, everything's gone. You mismanaged everything. If we're missing 20 pounds, if we're missing 50 pounds out the bank, if we're missing, maybe she overspent, maybe she wanted to get that bag, maybe she wanted to overspend. You're telling me we ain't got nothing? The couch is gone, the TV's gone, everything's gone. And I'm going to call that a mismanagement of money? It's impossible for that to be a mismanagement of money. Listen, mismanagement of money is a small thing, please, in the grand scheme of things. What you're witnessing is a country that is not yet free. I don't believe there's any, not even our enemy, if our enemy, well, it is our enemy, could put Africa in such a state where it is now, where there's basically nothing left in comparison to its worth. I do not believe there's any man or woman who has some form of an attachment to Africa, some form of an attachment to its countries, the leaders that we have, that they would leave that level and eat that much. You know what you're suggesting? You're suggesting that an African leader is less corrupt just by his skin color than a European leader. What tells you a European leader is any less corrupt? I want to answer that question right now. What tells you that any European leader is any less corrupt? And I'll prove it to you. Kemi Badenoch has been on a rampage right now in the media. She's been talking rubbish. She's been talking garbage. She's been going off. I'll play a few clips for you guys to see it.
And I want this country to be great for my children as well. We need to control it. We need to make sure that we are thinking about the next generation, not just who's going to wipe bottoms for us today. That's not good enough.
Okay. Now, you've written this morning about immigration, and you write that we cannot assume that all cultures are equally valid. So which cultures, in your view, are less valid than others?
Oh, lots. Cultures that believe in child marriage, for instance, or that women don't have equal rights. I actually think it's extraordinary that people think that's an unusual or controversial thing to say. Of course, not all cultures are equally valid. I don't believe in cultural relativism. I believe in Western values, the principles which have made this country great. And I think that we need to make sure that we continue to abide by those principles to keep the society that we have now.
So which particular cultures then would you say are less valid? Because as you've said, your words, not mine, some people think that that is a controversial thing to say. So which cultures would you specifically say are less valid than others?
So it's not about labeling cultures. Culture includes a lot of things. I'm not talking about cuisine, I'm talking about customs. And I think that cultures where women are told that they should not work, I would knock on doors. I'm sure Penny and Jake had this. You'd knock on doors and you'd see somebody at the door who says, oh, I can't speak to you, I will get my husband. I don't think that's as equally valid as our culture. But the point I was making in the op-ed was about immigration, that immigration is something which we need to make sure we get right. We didn't before. And there were three things I said we needed to do. One, numbers matter. I was quite surprised that Rob actually misrepresented what I've been saying. Numbers do matter. Culture matters even more. Who comes into the country is absolutely critical. And leadership. You need to start from the top. It's no good simply saying we're going to lower immigration and outsource it. It has to come very much from the Prime Minister himself or herself.
Are you saying, though, that if somebody in their culture who lives here in the UK, who might be a British citizen, who answered the door to you and said, I won't speak to you, I'd like you to speak to my husband instead, are you saying, you have said their culture is less valid, are you saying that people with those beliefs shouldn't be welcome in the UK?
I am saying that if we want to have a well-integrated society, we need to make sure that we have a shared culture and a shared identity. This is a multi-ethnic society. That's obvious. I'm a black woman sitting here talking to you. But there is a difference between being multi-ethnic and being multicultural. I grew up in a place that was multicultural, and yet everybody looked the same. Conflict arises when you emphasize difference. We need to emphasize the thing that we share. Being British, British values, the things that we talked about, freedom, equal rights, personal responsibility, not discriminating people because of their sexual orientation. There are some cultures that do that. I don't think that a culture that thinks gay people should be stoned is as valid as ours. This is not a controversial thing to say.
So my question is, what makes you assume that Kemi or any European leader or politician is any less corrupt than an African politician? It is merely the fact that you believe anything that is ran by African people is innately going to be more corrupt. Because corruption is happening here. Kemi is understanding the language of European politics. It's corruption. But they won't do it as bad as Africa. They won't disadvantage their own people to that degree because they're just better than us. You need to do the math, my brothers and sisters. The math here is that Africa has not yet been free. The money that you're expecting to be pumped into Africa, the money that you're expecting to see in Africa does not belong to Africa on paper. They have worked their way around it. If you think about the World Organization, IMF, World Bank, I always talk about these things. They have worked their way around it in which they control Africa by trade rules, interest rates, majority of the stuff that we own, whether it be oil, whether it be whatever, you need to go and search into these things. And a lot of you guys just talk. But I understand there is, despair when we see things back home and there's despair. But you need to read what independence, you need to read where our major funding would come from, where our major income would come from, where our major infrastructure would come from if we had the funds to do so. Those things don't even fully belong to us. I speak to this old man. He's a Pakistani old man. I love him so much. We have really great chats, and he says to me every time, You know, he's at the age where he repeats something all the time, forgetting that he already told it to me. But I love talking to elders. You gain wisdom. And he was speaking to me, and he goes, I used to be a mechanic. He goes, he always says to me, you know who owns the diamonds in Africa? He goes, who? The Queen. He says to me every time, but I love hearing it. I believe God sends them at the right times, you know, when I'm just digesting things, meditating on things, and he almost comes to just give me this confirmation on things I've been thinking about. And this guy, I didn't tell this guy how I think. He just would, I think he sensed I was not afraid of the topic. So he's, ever since, is like, will vent to me about these things. And he's grown up in this country, you know, an old timer now. But he says, when I was a mechanic, there used to be a man who would come get his car fixed in my garage. And that man used to work for the mine that the Queen owned in South Africa. Worked, was a part of the big businessman who was like either worked or was just a big like CEO in the company. And he signed me checks to fix his car in his garage. And he always dawned on him when he knew that guy's job of, why is the Queen owning diamonds belonging to South Africa? But we don't discuss this. We don't dive into this. The places in which we are supposed to be accumulating wealth. The places, this is why portraying the image of Africa's incompetence is so important. Because there's so many ways Africa could be making its revenue that we are paralyzed systematically within the world ring in terms of world organizations. So people like Kemi Badenoch, I'm afraid she also represents this poisonous mentality that a lot of us as Africans have. That we understand that selling ourselves to our opposition is the best option for an African. Selling ourselves to an opposition is the best option for an African. That is a belief that sits within the African. That it is better for me to play on the other team than to suffer with black people. If you do not know 5 people right now, whoever's watching this video, if you do not know at least 5 Africans who would not stick by black people once given the opportunity, what makes you think the leaders of African countries are going to do that? I think what we forget, and again, in my mother's book, that our leaders were also victims of colonization. Meaning their minds were also colonized. Meaning they also have a belief that the best way is the white way. Meaning if I attach myself to whiteness, meaning this naivety that they believe that whatever the white man tells them and the European and the imperialist tells them, it's the truth. Because a black man is corrupt. Innately corrupt. There's no desire, no belief, no heart for their own people. I've learned to have grace when I see elders, African elders, when I have loved ones, everyone who've looked at me with this mentality of, give up on Africa. It's rubbish. We're rubbish. We're rubbish. I had one Nigerian man call me and tell me how much Africa's just rubbish. With passion, veins popping out his head. Telling me how rubbish Nigeria is and corrupt and just losing his mind. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, am I not looking at this at a mentality? If I gave this brother an opportunity to go and be president tomorrow, you think he's going to lay his life down for African people? And that's the problem. We're looking at a bunch of African people who are Nigeria. But I hope you know the job that it would take to free Africa would be jumping over debt, would be jumping over people, the Western media, twisting the narrative about you. using your own soldiers, causing uncivil arrest in Africa, using your own soldiers to put your life at risk, cornering you systematically when it comes to trade rules, interest rates, in such a way where you think the only best way is to take a loan, and then you take the loan, then you're back in this trap over and over again, and then they get tighter grips on the minerals, Africa's minerals, tighter grip, and you're thinking, and we just think it's a guy who can come in and push a button. This will take the special kind of people. This will take the special time. This will take the once in a lifetime type people, the Mandelas, the guys who would sit and do a bid for 27 years. You name me one African who will sit and do a bid for 27 years. Maybe it won't be as like that no more, but it'll be different. Your life will be complex. So I understand, and I had this conversation in my last episode just there. We have to create an environment. Once we create an environment, right, that pressures people like Kemi Badenoch out of coonery, where we hold such a high standard for ourselves and we are so rooted in the freedom of Africa and sticking by it, and we watch our tongue towards Africa. And we have a self-belief and a hope, and we don't get caught up in the lies and the propaganda about who we are, that it is actually becomes more rewarding to fight for Africa than to fight against Africa. Kemi Badenoch is not losing. No African is losing sleep over Kemi Badenoch. I'll tell you that for sure. Maybe the conscious community, but anybody who wants to sit there and point fingers at Kemi Badenoch, I know a bunch of you people who hate black people too. I know a bunch of you people who hate black. I know a bunch of you people who would feel as if you would never delay your progress for black people. You wouldn't even give a post on behalf of racism. You would never delay your progress on behalf of African people. You would never delay what will feel like a delay, what would feel like a stumbling block. You would never do that on behalf of African people, because you were taught that African people are a lost cause, and they are the cause of their own destruction. Even the fact that slavery landed upon them, it's because they called it upon themselves, which then camouflages the fact that we've never actually escaped from colonization. The fact that we are not living in neo-colonialism. So I ask my brothers and sisters today of Nigeria, please, please, please go easy on Nigeria. Watch what you say about Nigeria. Watch how you're in the habit of a legacy of spewing. I don't care how much Burna Boy songs you play. I don't care how much Asaka songs you play. That's the imperialists or white people never disputed that we were talented people. He never disputed that we had talent and gifts. It was intellect. It was capacity. He never disputed. He used us as entertainment. So just because you show your love for Africa by showing how much you love putting African songs on your African Afro artists on your Instagram reels does not tell me you love Africa. Show me you love Africa by saying, I will first begin to understand the propaganda that was said about Africa, and I will not perpetuate the propaganda that was said about the incompetence of the black man. You're just perpetuating a legacy that was already set. And when you're doing that, you do not know you're camouflaging diamonds coming out of Africa, minerals coming out of Africa, people being bullied, cornered. Does that mean I think our African leaders are not people who are corrupt? Of course. They're not too far-fetched from a Kemi Badenoch. But I want you guys to understand that there is a culture of self-loathe in Africa. Because the version of even history that we understand till this day is through the eyes of the ones who colonized us. The version of history that we even understand today is the one that is through the eyes of our oppressor. So we don't understand its legacy and how it lives in today, in us, in the systems which control Africa, and in each African. You will not get a revolution for Africa unless you revolutionize the minds of African people, where they know, before I do anything else, I will not speak a bad word on our incompetence, on our competence. So again, before I sign out, I ask you this. What tells you that an African leader is any more corrupt than Donald Trump? Because if you believe that it's down to the corruption of African leaders, in which why we're still in the state is, you are believing that an African leader is more corrupt than Donald Trump. And it doesn't get any more corrupt than that. And if you're a Trump supporter, let's move on to something better. You're believing an African leader is any more corrupt than the Tory party. If you live in the UK, you'll understand what that is. And it don't get any more corrupt than that. You think of the most corrupt Western leader you've ever known. Think of him. Think of even the fact that Western countries are corrupt. They go to implement democracy in countries, supposedly, spend billions on armies, sitting in people's countries because they love to help people, and that's the story you bought. Question that side of yourself. That comes from the fact that not because you're stupid, not because you're stupid, because you lack so much racial self-esteem that it was so easy to infiltrate your mind with a belief about yourself that you are so silly, you are so incompetent, that no, not 20 pounds is missing out your bank, not 50 pounds, not 10 pounds. The whole furniture came back, like the example I used. Wifey done wiped out everything. And I'm saying, you so corrupt, wifey. Why? Because everything's gone. The couch is gone. The TV's gone. And then we call that mismanagement. That's not mismanagement, brothers and sisters. That's a robbery. That's a robbery. That's a robbery. That's a robbery. And they, African leaders, are just also victims to the robbery. They may go home with a lousy 5, 10, even 1 billion, I don't care. With the amount of billions Africa's worth, they go home with a lousy little cut. And I guess I'll tell you one thing they value more than that lousy little cut. Their lives. Their lives. If you ever question how dangerous Western powers are, look at the extent Netanyahu is going to bomb and destroy people. You think African leader is a walk in the park. You are fighting and dodging death. You are fighting and dodging people who have trained your army, who have army bases sitting in your countries, waiting for you to get smart, waiting for you to get brave. Their livelihoods in their countries are resting on a huge chunk of your income, of your resources, waiting for you to get brave. And on top of it all, you have African people. I can pull out 5 Nigerians today. I can pull out 5 any part of Africa who, in the core of their eyes, talk black, love African music, but whatever, all that garbage. But inside, I know they honestly think if I brought a witty and smart enough imperialist to them and told them, it's better for you to serve me. It will work better in the end. What do your own people know anyway? Look, they manipulate. I can see an African leader feeling the only best way, like Kemi Badenoch, is to serve the oppressor and to believe the oppressor. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe.
And I'm on a mission for you.